Okay, so welcome everyone to the first Gloucestershire Economic Growth Scrutiny Committee meeting. Just wanted to obviously welcome everyone to the meeting. I know we've got the previous joint committee meeting ran on, so we may have a few people joining later. But I just wanted to sort of start off the meeting today. Well, I guess first of all, we just need to note any apologies. I know we've got a couple. Robert Vine, sorry, Sophie, I don't know if you have.
Yeah, so I'm only aware of Councillor Robert Vines and Steve Mawson, but we will have a few more officers joining shortly.
Okay. So I guess the first thing, obviously, this is a sort of a lot of new faces and all the rest of it on the committee, on the scrutiny committee today. So we were proposing to sort of do a quick sort of round the table, so to speak, just to kind of do any introductions and things like that. I appreciate, obviously, as we say, we've got some people joining later, but just to kind of give a very brief introduction, if people are happy to do so. We've obviously got slightly different than some scrutiny committees where we've got obviously some county councillors, some district councillors, and then we've obviously got the officers as well. So I was going to start off with the county councillors, if that's okay. I'll try and pick people out by name, but if I miss anyone, please do shout. I think rather than trying to do a sort of free-for-all on a Skype, on a WebEx call like this, makes it a bit tricky to sort of all chip in. But so I was just going to sort of start the ball rolling. So my name's Matt Babbage, chair of the Economic Growth Scrutiny Committee. I'm a county councillor. I represent Battledown and Charlton Kings in Cheltenham. Let me just jump across to my list of county councillors on here. So I've got Rebecca Halifax.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, newly minted county councillor, Cirencester Park, taken over from Joe Harris.
Fantastic. Dom Morris, I've got next.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Dom Morris, Fairford and Lechlade, so the new Ray Theodolou, and I'll do my best to fill his shoes.
Robert Vine, got apologies for, haven't we? I've then got Roger Wyborn. I'm not sure. Are you, Paul? Are you?
I can hear you.
Oh, sorry, Roger. Ah, sorry, you are there. Yep.
Yeah, I can hear you and see you, but I'm having trouble with my camera. So in a moment, I'll try and get on from the council laptop instead of where I am now, and then kill this one off. But yeah, I'm representing Ben Hall and Haverley, new to the county council and learning things, but not new to being a councillor, having been 13 years on CBC.
Welcome. Next, we've got Alistair Chambers. So I'm not sure. We've got Alistair on.
I can't see that Alistair's joined yet, though.
Okay. So I'm just trying to pick out, trying to remember who's county and who's district. Is anyone else on as a county councillor today? Oh, Paul. Sorry, you're right there. Sorry, Paul Baker. Go on.
Hi Matt, I know you well. Newly elected county councillor for Charlton Park and College, and also borough councillor in Cheltenham Borough. Thank you.
Brilliant. So that, I believe, is all the county councillors then. So if we go on to the district.
Chair, if I may.
So yeah, please do. Sorry, that's
Sad Patel here. Yeah. Hi, I'm also
a
county councillor as well and a city councillor.
Okay, you're here for representing Gloucester today, yeah.
That's right, yes, correct. Yes, thank you.
Next, district councillor, Chloe Turner.
Hello everyone, yes, I'm district councillor for Minchinhampton, also county councillor, but I'm here with my district hat on today.
So Chloe, and then we've got Nikki Packer for the Forest of Dean.
Good afternoon. Yes, I'm representing Forest of Dean as a district councillor. Thank you.
Paul McCloskey, Cheltenham.
Hi there, Paul. Hi, Paul McCloskey, Borough Councillor in Charlton Kings, so I know Matt quite well. The reason he's here is that I'm not, but I'm here as a district councillor. Also worth saying that I'm a non-executive director of Publica, which may be of interest to the Forest of Dean and Cotswolds people.
Okay, and we've got John Murphy, Tewkesbury.
Yes, hello everybody. My name's John Murphy. I'm a borough councillor for Tewkesbury, and I represent the Winchcombe ward.
Fantastic. And then last on my list, I've got Gina. Gina Bloomfield in Cotswolds.
Yes, hello. I'm Gina Bloomfield. I'm representing Cotswold District Council. My ward is right in the north of the county, Chipping, Camden and Vale. And I was involved in this committee last year too, and the year before. Thank you.
Fantastic. So hopefully that's all the district councillors we got there. So now I was going to sort of do a run through of officers. I haven't got a list as such, so I'm going to try and pick out names, which means I will invariably miss somebody out. But I don't know if Sophie, do you want to kick off on the officers side of things?
So I'm Sophie Benfield. I'm the Democratic Services representative, and I'll be supporting the committee from that side of things.
Fantastic. And then I've got, let's jump around. Sorry about this. So first on my screen, I've got Angela Presdy.
Hi, I'm Angela Presdy. I'm in the Economic Development and Strategic Infrastructure team in the County Council.
Cool. And then I've got Colin Chick. Oh, I think you're on mute, Colin.
Hi, I'm Colin Chick. I'm Executive Director for Economy, Environment and Infrastructure at Gloucestershire County Council.
Fantastic. And then David Owen. Not sure if you count as an officer or not, but yeah.
I don't mind. Afternoon, everyone. David Owen. I'm Chief Executive of G1st Local Enterprise Partnership.
Cool. And Mike Dawson.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mike Dawson, Chief Executive of Tewkesbury Borough Council and Chair of the Joint Committee Senior Officer Group. Thank you.
Cool. And then next on the list, Gillian.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gillian Parkinson. I'm the Assistant Director of Legal Services at Gloucestershire County Council.
And I've got Catherine next.
Hi, I'm Catherine Martin. I'm from the Data and Analysis team at the County Council.
And then I've got Andrea. I don't know if you were, whether you're here as obviously running the UK.
Andrea's just supporting me today.
Okay, I won't put Andrea on the spot then. That's a bit unfair, isn't it? Is that everybody then? Hopefully, please shout if I haven't.
Just to say, Chair, that's everyone we've got here, but we are expecting Pete Carr and Simon Excel shortly. They'll be joining us slightly late.
Okay. Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for joining. As I say, as people join in, we can, I'm sure, we'll catch up when we get to the various items and that sort of thing. So just moving on with the agenda then. So the second item on our list on the agenda is about an election of vice chair. There's going to be a slight change on that one. So I think there's a bit of a change of thought on that one. So Sophie, I don't know if you want to come in on that one just to explain the situation. And
yeah, thank you, Chair. So basically, just to explain a bit of background slightly, I don't know if members are aware, but the legislation that allowed local authorities to hold the public meetings virtually through COVID actually expired in May. So since then, we've had to make decisions on how and where we hold our meetings. So if you're aware that this morning's meeting, because it was a decision-making body, it's actually been held in person. This meeting today isn't a formal scrutiny committee, it's an introductory meeting to introduce members to the work of the scrutiny committee going forward. So with that in mind, items such as signing off the minutes of the previous meeting, you'll notice isn't on the agenda today. And also the vice chair appointment is a decision that needs to be made by the committee formally. So we're not formally able to appoint a vice chair at the meeting today. But we didn't want the item to go missing. We thought it would be useful to have it on your radar, especially we've got a lot of new members here. So it is a position that will be attached to the scrutiny committees. So if you can just give some thought before the next meeting of who you may want to put forward for that position. We're hoping that that may be in July, but it's not something I could confirm as of yet. So I hope that's okay for everyone. Is there any questions?
No. Okay. Moving on then. Declarations of interest. I'm guessing because it's not we're not taking any votes or anything today. I'm assuming that won't be an issue. But again, please shout if needs be. And that brings us on to sort of the agenda proper, so to speak. Obviously, with this being the first meeting, we wanted to sort of set out what the kind of boundaries of this committee are, what will be, you know, what sort of things we scrutinise, what bodies and what areas we do cover. So we thought the first item made sense to be a terms of reference, just to kind of set out, firstly, what the joint committee does, but also then where the scrutiny committee comes in on that. So I won't go into any more than that, but Gillian, I believe you're.
Yes, thank you,
okay.
Chair. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this report I also took to the joint committee this morning, and I know, as you've already said, Chair, I was really mindful of the fact that we've got new members. So for those who've already been a member of the scrutiny committee or the joint committee, then this will just be a refresher. So what the report does, as you can see, it just highlights the key operational arrangements regarding the joint committee and the history in terms of how it was actually originally set up back in 2014, running initially for a term of 5 years, and at the moment has been extended through till March next year. March 2022. So at this morning's joint committee meeting, the chair asked for a paper to be brought back about that and for a referral to the senior officer group of the joint committee. But the key, I think, issue for your committee obviously is the scrutiny arrangements, which sets out in paragraphs 15 to 18 of the report. And you can see the key points are around paragraph 16, which is obviously to review the decisions, plans and policies of the joint committee, and also to review the overall impact and delivery of outcomes of Gloucester's strategic economic plan, and to make recommendations to the LEP and Gloucester Economic Growth Joint Committee on the issues and improvements. And so what you've got within that report is the explanation around what the joint committee terms of reference are. So paragraph 3 really brings together the overarching aims of the joint committee, which is to do anything it considers likely to achieve the promotion or improvement of the economic well-being of the area of Gloucestershire. And then it's got some caveats in there in terms of the joint committee's decision-making powers. So I think it's worth members just having a read through the terms of reference for the joint committee, bearing in mind your role as scrutiny committee in terms of those activities and decisions which are taken at the joint committee. I'm quite happy to answer any questions on the actual overall arrangements. You'll also see there is a reference within the scrutiny arrangements regarding call-in, and the usual practice is that if we have a call-in, and I might add we've never had a call-in, I'll probably regret saying that today, but we've never had a call-in, and the arrangements are that if one partner authority calls in a decision, it's subject to referral to the procedures of that particular partner authority. But if we get more than one partner calling in the joint committee's decision, then it would come before you. So I think that's probably all I wanted to say, Chair. I'm mindful, obviously, you've got lots on your agenda to get to. I'm quite happy to answer any questions if that would help.
Okay, thank you. One thing I never said earlier on was, in terms of if people want to speak and that sort of thing, obviously, however you want to indicate, we'll try and use the hands, sort of raising the electronic hands option. Is that actually on there today? Have we got that one? I think that one should be available to people. So if we try and use that, but equally, if that's not working, then please just sort of indicate, either sort of physically raise your hand or chip in if I'm missing people out. Does anyone have any questions or comments on that item? No. Well, in that case, everything is very clear, and yeah. Thank you very much, Gillian. Right, we'll move on then. Next on the list then, we've got a general kind of oh, sorry, actually, one thing I was going to say, I know, sorry, Sophie, I know you put on the general kind of scrutiny committee structure as well on this item, just to kind of give a bit of background. I wasn't planning to go into that, to talk about that in particular, but I just wanted to obviously give people an opportunity if there is anything people wanted to mention on that. And again, if not, can't see anyone indicating, so we'll move on to item 5 then. So again, sort of following the sort of terms of reference, sort of the 3 bodies that we sort of scrutinise, obviously the Gloucester Economic Growth Joint Committees we just talked about, the Gloucestershire County Council in its own right, but also then the G1st LEP. So we've got a presentation or a report from each of those now, I believe. So first up, we've got David on G1st LEP, if that's, we can hand over to you, David.
Thanks very much, and I'll try and keep it as brief as possible. I circulated a paper, or Sophie circulated a paper beforehand with some links to some of the core documents that hopefully you've had time to review and give you a flavour of the work that the LEP's involved in. I guess first and foremost, our mission is to sustainably grow the economy of Gloucestershire. So we cover the geography of Gloucestershire. Not South Gloucestershire, as some people confuse. We don't cross that border. We're coterminous with the county council and with other partners in Gloucestershire as well, which is very helpful. I think, why is scrutiny important to us? Well, we're a high-performing local enterprise partnership. We have, as all LEPs do, what we describe as our own Ofsted report every year, where government come in and have a look at the work that we're doing as a local enterprise partnership and score us and rank us, and we've always performed very well on that. There was a threat to us performing very well on that about 3 years ago now, when the question was raised as the role of scrutiny and how well scrutiny was operating, and whether it was actually scrutinising the work of the LEP effectively or not. And I'm pleased to say, in discussions with the team in GCC and the chair at the time, we managed to turn that around and get to a position where it was recognised that the role that scrutiny was playing in looking at the work of the LEP was effective. And hopefully we can continue in that vein, where the role that you play as a scrutiny committee will be really important in ensuring that how government judge us is effective as well, and that we continue to be seen as a high performing area in terms of economic growth and the broader work that local enterprise partnership does. So what you'll have seen from the papers that I circulated, or the links that I circulated, is we're now in year 5 of our growth deal funding. So it ends at the end of this financial year. The details of the types of projects were in one of the links that was sent through to you. Our structure as a local enterprise partnership follows national guidelines for structures, although they're all slightly different. So our board lead the local enterprise partnership. There are up to 15 members of our board at any one time. Member representation from the county council and district council, representation from further and higher education, representation from the voluntary and community sector, and then representation in the majority from the private sector. And that's guidance which is set down by government about how local enterprise partnerships need to operate. In support of our board, we have an investment panel which looks at in full detail at any of the investments that the local enterprise partnership is going to make, either through the growth deal funding or getting building funding or various other funding pots that come along, but as well as that through the Growing Places Fund, which is our very successful revolving loan fund. And we then have 10 business sector groups which represent all of the key business sectors in Gloucestershire and are made up of a a mixture largely of private sector representatives, but also public sector and voluntary and community sector representatives, bringing that genuine, strong business voice, sector voice into the work of the local enterprise partnership. It's also important to reflect that the money that we spend, so the 120 odd million pound now that's come through the LEP board to be spent on infrastructure projects in Gloucestershire, doesn't come into us as an organisation. It sits with our accountable body, which is the County Council. And it's fair to say that our relationship with the accountable body, with GCC as our accountable body, has been excellent over the years. It's recognised as that by governments. I feel very smug actually when I talk to my other LEP chief exec colleagues around the country as to just how well that relationship works. We've got a very open, very sensible relationship with the accountable body, which enables us to fund the right projects, to fund them in the right way, to scrutinise those projects and to make sure they're delivering what they should deliver, and to be able to make changes quickly where we need to on any projects that we're funding. So you will have seen the connection to the local industrial strategy, and we probably at some point need to change the terms of reference of the Joint Committee and the Scrutiny Committee to reflect the shift from strategic economic plan to local industrial strategy, or whatever it might be called next, because of course government have recently launched their new plan for the economy, and we're working through at the moment how that will reflect at a local level and what changes we might need to make to our local industrial strategy. When the board set about the process of putting a local industrial strategy together, first and foremost, they said the most important thing that we do, if this is a strategy for the long term, is listen to young people in the county and what their drivers are. So we were the only area of the country that surveyed over 6,000 young people to find out what they wanted from the future economy of Gloucestershire and what their drivers were. And that put us on a really secure footing when we brought together the strategy ultimately. So there are a number of cross-cutting themes in the strategy, as you will have seen. The importance of net zero, which is becoming increasingly important, how Gloucestershire can play a lead role in the shift to net zero, both in terms of how we operate as a county, but also some of the businesses that we have in Gloucestershire and the opportunities that a shift to net zero presents for those businesses. The importance of flexibility, which was a pre-COVID desire of ours in the local industrial strategy. We recognised if we were going to attract more younger people into Gloucestershire, given our ageing demographic, that's our biggest challenge, then we needed to have a really flexible approach to employment and employability in Gloucestershire. And that's only become more apparent over the course of the last 15 months as we've been in the position that we've been in as an economy globally. And then the importance of innovation for us. So we have this long history of innovation in Gloucestershire. The inventors of the jet engine, the lawnmower, mass immunisation, etc., a great history of innovation in Gloucestershire that we want to continue. And currently we've got more businesses in Gloucestershire involved in innovation than most other parts of the country, and much higher than the national average. And that's very much supported by our growth hubs and the rollout of our growth hub programme across the county, which has been extremely successful in engaging businesses and supporting them to grow. And then there's a sectoral focus. So by far and away, the biggest potential growth sector for the whole of Gloucestershire is the cyber-tech industry. This is, and I deliberately say the whole of Gloucestershire, this is not a Cheltenham-centric potential for growth, it's a whole Gloucestershire potential for growth. And we've seen some of that to come to fruition in the last few months with the investment that we made in Cirencester College in their digital skills centre, for example, also in the plans from Gloucester City in the Forum project, and the redevelopment of King's Quarter, which are very much focused around cyber. And of course, Golden Valley and all the work that's going on in Cheltenham as well. And I think our challenge over the coming years is to ensure that that growth in cyber tech does reach all parts of Gloucestershire, because it certainly has that potential to do that. Secondly, potential to grow in agri-tech. So because of some of our assets in the county, namely Camden BRI in the north of the county, Royal Agricultural University in Cirencester, and Hartbury College and University in the Forest of Dean, we've got a huge potential to be a focus point for agri-tech development and growth for the whole of the UK and indeed internationally. And we've been doing a serious amount of work on that over the course of the last couple of years. And as I've already mentioned, there are big opportunities for our businesses because of some of the strengths we've got here already, in the green industrial revolution, as it was once called, in the shift to net zero and the technology and the techniques that are attached to that over the coming years. Now, clearly, the last 15 months has been a period of huge change. Some of you that were on the committee before will have been bored of hearing me talk about how we were 18 months ago in the process of preparing for Brexit and had a team of people who were working with business to understand the implications of that. We were able to shift them very quickly into understanding what the implications of COVID might be on the economy of Gloucestershire. And you would have seen in the link to our recovery plan some of the analysis that was done early days on what the economic impact on Gloucestershire might be. And you'll see in a presentation that I think was circulated yesterday or day before that will come up later, what the actual impact has been so far on Gloucestershire's economy in terms of unemployment, in terms of the furlough scheme and the impact that's had, and also in terms of the way in which our economy has shrunk over the course of the last 15 months or so. So what we did was a four-stage approach, really. First of all was to get ourselves ready to respond and to respond remotely. We did that very quickly. We did it before the start of the first national lockdown. We had everybody set up ready to work at home, predicting that that's what was going to happen. I think pretty much everybody was predicting that was what was going to happen at the time. So we made sure we were ahead of the game and could still respond and react and work with businesses. Secondly, then, it was about gathering intelligence from businesses in Gloucestershire, understanding what the impact of COVID would be, understanding what the impact of lockdowns would be on them and other measures, and then feeding that into government to make sure that as far as possible, the support that was needed for businesses in Gloucestershire was coming down the line either nationally or was able to be provided locally. And we've seen some real successes in that over the course of the last 15 months, where information that we've fed up the chain alongside other LEPs as well has then resulted in announcements from government of new support for particular businesses or sectors where it's been really needed. Thirdly, then, it was about informing businesses of what support was available. So we worked really closely with district partners in particular who were responsible for handing out some of the blanket grant schemes that came through from government to highlight to businesses that those were available and what they needed to do to access that support, but also getting the information out on what national schemes were available for businesses to ensure that they wherever possible would survive the economic shock of a pandemic over the course of the last 15 months. We then put together the recovery plan, which you've had a link to. We're now implementing that recovery plan, and the next step then is about how do we build resilience into the economy of Gloucestershire, and what are the things that we need to consider so that our economy is as resilient as possible, either from an ongoing threat of COVID and what implications that might have. I think it's pretty clear that it's not very clear at the moment what the long-term effects might be, and whether we might see more implications or further either local or national lockdowns down the line. But also, of course, the resilience that comes from other economic shocks that we might experience in Gloucestershire. It's fair to say our resilience in the county is pretty strong. It historically has been. When we get economic downturns, we generally go into them a little bit later, and we usually come out of them a little bit quicker. The data that we're seeing at the moment suggests that trend might well be continuing, but it's a little bit early to be totally confident in making that prediction at the moment. And the other changes that's going on, not just those economic changes and the impact of COVID and everything related to that over the last 15 months, there's some structural changes going on as well. So there's currently a LEP review that government commissioned 3 months ago now that we're going through at a national level. The purpose of that review is to strengthen the business voice in local decision making and to use LEPs as the tool to do that. So we're working really closely with our colleagues across LEPs across England to work alongside government to make sure that the outcomes of the LEP review work for Gloucestershire and that we can continue to have the positive relationships that we have with local government colleagues, with business, with the voluntary community sector, with our education providers and everybody else in the county to drive our economy forward. And hopefully the other change that we're going through at the moment, hopefully you've seen, will have seen over the last few months, we're advertising at the moment for a new chair for a number of new private sector board members. So A number of our current board members from the private sector, including our chair and vice chair, will have done their full terms of office and so step down at the end of August. So there's going to be other change in terms of how the LEP runs and functions over the course of the next few months as we appoint a new chair, vice chair, and a number of other new private sector board members as well. So I'll go back to what I said at the start. Yeah, the role of scrutiny is really important for us. It's important from us from a technical perspective in that if we want to continue to be a high-performing local enterprise partnership and judged as that by government, then the scrutiny role needs to be strong and needs to work well, and it has done over the course of the last few years, thanks to some changes that were made. But also from a practical perspective, it's good for us as the LEP to be tested on some of the decisions that we're making, the processes that we're using to make those decisions, and whether we're tracking the investments that we've made and we're having the impact that we believe we should be having to improve Gloucestershire's economy. So I look forward to working with you all over your terms on this panel, and to being tested and to testing back as well at times to local authority colleagues. I'll leave it there. I'm happy to take any questions.
That's great, thank you. I can see, Rebecca, you've got your hand raised. Do you want to kick off?
Yeah, actually, sorry, I should have taken that down. That was from way back in the beginning. I was going to ask when we were doing the introductions for you to give a little lowdown on yourself, Matt, but maybe you could do that in a bit.
Okay, we've got Chloe. So I'm
yes.
looking
Hi,
around
David.
trying to find faces. Yep.
I think it's great that you took voices of young people into account in putting together the local industrial strategy. I just wondered what their primary drivers were, what came out of that, and how's that reflected in the strategy?
So yeah, we've got a full report which we're more than happy to share. I think it's available on our website, but more than happy to share that with the committee. So they're not surprisingly, there was a big focus on the climate emergency and their desire to see that resolved, and to see us taking practical actions that would lead to that being resolved. There was a similar, which was relatively surprising to us, there was a similar enthusiasm for the natural environment, which was really positive. So lots of the narrative in the comments field was about how much they value the countryside in Gloucestershire and the mix of urban and rural, which was really, really welcomed. A real drive to that want for flexibility. So that cross-cutting theme that we've put in the strategy around flexibility. We'd seen data nationally which suggested that younger people were certainly looking for more flexible employment options, and that was a real driver for them. That came through in the local survey work as well. Their concerns were public transport. So they're by far and away their biggest concern, other than the climate emergency, was public transport and their inability to get to work or education or to socialise through the use of public transport. And we know that the trends show that fewer and fewer young people are looking to pass their driving test or to drive their own car or can afford to drive their own car. So that was by far and away their biggest concern. But I'm more than happy to share the overall results of the survey with the group if you find that useful.
Thank you. And just one follow-up question, if I may. Of the sort of large investments that you've brought to Gloucestershire to date, would you say that they've sort of addressed those primary interests so far? I'm particularly thinking of the climate change and the public transport ones.
I think I've said this previously, over the last 2 years since we wrote the local industrial strategy, there are investments that we made on the back of the strategic economic plan that we probably wouldn't make on the back of the local industrial strategy because of the increased focus on the environment and a shift to net zero. So I think we can probably only judge the investments that we made previously on the aspirations that were in the strategic economic plan. I think if we were starting all over again with a clean sheet of paper and that money, we'd probably make different investment decisions over the course of the next 5 years than we have done over the last 5 years.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for David at that point? And oh, sorry, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. David, thank you. That was a really excellent presentation. I didn't realise how much you guys did. One of my questions was about COVID and about the transition of people working from offices to working from home, and where LEP fits in with that in terms of understanding how that is going to be shifting in Gloucestershire, perhaps over the next year or so, and therefore how that changes our demand for infrastructure, car parks, and things like that. Because for me, it seems there's going to be a really, really big shift, and it's a really big opportunity to change the way we do some of our investments. So I'd be quite interested to know where we are with that. And in terms of the green economy, we talk about carbon zero quite a lot, but I don't actually see much in there about a green agenda in terms of companies getting involved in green infrastructure and developing products for the green economy. I don't really see much about that, but I see a lot about carbon zero. And when we're talking about carbon zero, and we're talking about achieving this through economic growth and development, are we not also talking to existing employers about how they can move towards that agenda?
Yes, we are. I'll take your second point first, if I can. So our Growth Hub is talking to existing employers. Government launched, I think it was the week before last, the business-focused approach to net zero. So there are 3 tiers to that, and our Growth Hub will be pushing those out to employers. We've employed specialist business advisors over the course of the last 8 months now, who are specifically working on the net zero agenda for businesses and offering free impartial advice to businesses about how they can start to move towards net zero as individual businesses. I was with one of our board members just yesterday talking about how we can put further focus on that over the coming months and years to make sure that businesses are both addressing their own net zero challenges, but spotting the opportunities as well that there are. So we've got a very active energy group, which local authorities have been very active in as well, which has put together jointly with the County Council an energy strategy, which is really important for us. But also then our Growth Hub's rolling out that advice on net zero to individual businesses. In terms of the changing sort of post-pandemic working patterns, I was talking about this on to Radio Gloucestershire yesterday, because there was a story on the BBC website from the Centre for Cities where they were predicting that within 2 years everybody will be back to 5 days a week in the office. I think they're talking rubbish, frankly. I think it's an opinion piece. It's not based on any fact or evidence. Actually, the fact and evidence of survey work done in the UK, all across Europe and in the US is that an increasing number of employees want a more flexible approach and want to have that mix of working at home and working in the office, importantly. But also the data that's coming out of businesses is that they welcome that approach, and they've not seen productivity suffer during the pandemic where people are working from home. I've been asked the question a lot in the last 6 months about, well, what does that mean for some of the bigger developments going on in the county, like Golden Valley, like the Forum in Gloucester? And my answer to that is we've had woefully inadequate supply of good quality office accommodation in Gloucestershire for decades now. And so actually those 2 projects in particular are catch up on where we probably should and would have wanted to have been some time ago. I think Colin's more of an expert than me on transport infrastructure, or Simon Excello, I think, is on the call as well. But it is going to mean changes in how people use transport. I think what's not clear yet is what those changes look like. And without wanting to get my crystal ball out, I'm not entirely sure what those changes will be. I do think we'll end up with a much more mixed approach to how people operate. But I also think it's important to remember there's quite a considerable number of the population that can't work at home. They're in consumer-facing roles, or they're in a role where you've got to be by a large piece of machinery that you can't take home. So I think we'll end up still with a lot of people going to a workplace. I think the flexibility will come for those that don't necessarily have to go to a workplace.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't know if Colin or Simon want to come in on that point. I can. After that, I've got Roger and then Rebecca. But I don't know if, Colin or Simon, you want to add anything?
I mean, I can pick something up in my presentation, but very, very quickly. On the transport front, it's a balance. What you've got to realise is in the county at the moment, we have a rail system that runs parallel with the M5. And in fact, even better than that, because it actually has a natural branch that comes off and goes down to Wales from Gloucester. It starts in Birmingham, it finishes in Bristol, the same as the M5, but better than M5 because it goes right through the centre of all the towns. Yet only 1% of all journeys in that corridor are by rail. We need to improve the rail offer. Otherwise, we cannot keep living and keep improving junctions on the M5. I think it's going to be the solution. The county needs growth if it's going to get to where it needs to get to in the future, both employment-wise and homes for the people or young people growing up. We're scheduled to build over 100,000 houses in the next 20 years. And we can't keep meeting that by thinking we can just keep expanding the M5. We need to, and let's be honest about it. And why at the moment is it only 1%? Well, would you get a train to work if it only runs once every hour? You miss that train, or it's delayed, or it's cancelled. That's a very long miss, isn't it? You're going to get to work very late. So we need to improve those services, and we're doing it. We're working on that. By the end of this year or early next year, would have been the end of this year. It would have been May. In fact, it already happened if it hadn't been for COVID. But by this time next year, we will have the metro service running to Gloucester from Bristol, giving us a 30-minute service. We will have an additional train each hour stopping at Ashchurch. We've just gone through what's called the Continuous Modular Planning Study, CMPS, with Network Rail, and through lobbying in that, we've already secured a number of proposals that will be, which are in draft form at the moment, but they will be hopefully embedded in their plans over the next 10 years, which will include things like making a 15-minute service, a real metro service, just turn up and go basically from Gloucester to Bristol. We will, with the Garden Town being built at Ashchurch, they've agreed that they will be putting in two additional services, including the additional one that comes on next year to Ashchurch. So at the moment, Ashchurch only has one train every 2 hours, would you believe? Next year, it will have one train every hour. And as part of the CMSP, their proposals are to have a train every half hour stopping at Ashchurch, with one additional train an hour stopping at Ashchurch and going down to Wales. So again, you start to see, we need to get out of let's improve the M5 junctions. That needs to happen, but we need a much more better and balanced approach. In parallel with that, we are moving forward with the B4603, which will create the cycle spine right the way through from Sharpness to Bishop's Cleeve eventually, with a junction at near Sewell Junction on the canal that will take that out to Stroud as well. So we'll start to have a real spine through the centre of the county with a high quality cycle route. And we're already starting work at the moment with the initial proposals, looking at a mass rapid transit system that can run from south of Gloucester, initially from central Gloucester to central Cheltenham, but we're looking at how that could be taken down to Stroud and up to Bishop's Cleeve, or even Ashchurch to the north. So there are a number of things we're looking at in terms of that sustainable transport type. But what we also need to do, and we shouldn't forget, is that if we're going to grow, let's design properly from day one, and that is a strategic design approach for growth, where we put a new railway station on a railway line and then build around it in a sustainable way and create a sustainable community which is linked properly with good high quality walking and cycling routes within it. And we allow that to grow, rather than what we do at the moment, which is just wrap another onion skin layer around the existing town push out the development even further still, and make the town even less sustainable than it already is, and make it almost impossible for anyone to get anywhere other than in their car. So we need to think about how we move forward as a county in that growth. And if we don't do that, we'll just be planning for more and more problems as we go forward.
That's great, thank you. Sorry, I missed out, Pete. I know you had your hand up earlier. I don't know if you wanted to come in. Sorry, Pete Carr.
Thanks, Matt. Sorry, it was just in response to what Paul was asking, really, just around the green agenda, net zero agenda, and it was just to add something very briefly to what David and Colin were saying. One of the things that's definitely coming through from young people is the desire to actually work within careers that actually support the environment as well. And one of the things is that there's a lot of rhetoric and has been for quite a while around sort of the green jobs. And one of the things that we're really focusing on at the moment is to try and understand what those are and actually do that sort of translation, because the training providers are finding it very difficult to actually deliver training to that sort of route, because they're not quite sure what the careers are, and B, it involves quite a bit of physical investment in equipment and premises to do some of the work. So the other thing I was just going to say very briefly on that is that as part of the work that we're doing in the county, and you'll hear more from Colin around it, with things like the Community Renewal Fund, the idea is to support bids that include green skills work. So there's two really important bids in at the moment from South Gloucestershire College and also from Gloucestershire College. So just wanted to flag those. Thanks, Matt.
Okay, thank you. Roger, you next on the list then.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm glad that in the queue of speakers, as it were, that Colin Chick input came in between my question and, because I completely, well, everything you said, Colin, and my question's about transport but I mean, I think everything that Colin has said is completely complementary to all the things, transport and all the rest of it. Integrated rail services and Gloucester Cheltenham, both ends further integrated, not integrated, so plus and plus. But really going right back to what you said, David, about the survey and in particular the transport to work issue, which was pretty well there after climate. I think as to what your next is in that area concerning that particular problem, because I see that as a real potential hindrance for young people getting work. Not find jobs nearby, but to realise your potential, you need to be travelling somewhere else in the county, and accepting the fact that obviously a lot more work will be done from home. A lot of work will still be done travelling to it. I think probably the single bit for you, not only for young people, to sort of work in a way which maximises the benefit to the local economy, if you like, is the transport to work situation. I've done it myself when I living in Hatherley, as I still do, and working in Staverton. To actually commute that journey by public transport, and if you like, to make your contribution to the planet and to congestion and to try to get to work stress-free without relying on the private car, is exceedingly difficult. And it isn't actually just about going to shop as well. Shop in town on a Saturday afternoon, it is just completely by bus. a lot of this is by bus. You know, important. I'm a person for it, but a lot of this is by bus because of the sheer nature of the county. So I think, with all that background I've just said and what Colin said, I'm sort of wondering what you see as the NEP's next on improving the transport offer.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dave. Hopefully you caught most of it. I know, Roger, I know you were cutting out for bits for me, but I think we got the gist of it at least. But
I think I did. You had the touch of the Norman Collier about you, Roger, there, I'm afraid, which just ages me a lot, doesn't it? But I think I've got the gist. I think there's a number of steps that we need to take. I think all of the things that Colin's talked about are really important. I think we've looked at some work with the county council in what are the alternatives, particularly for rural areas around public transport that aren't double-decker buses trying to travel around small lanes, and how do you make that more efficient and more effective? How do you get that modal shift? I think if we're going to meet net zero targets, either as a county or as a country, then we've got to make some really difficult decisions. We've been really clear with groups that have spoken to us over the course of the last 18 months or so, because generally when I do presentations to business groups, I did one to a Chamber of Commerce recently, and one of the questions that comes up always is, what are you doing about car parking? What are you doing about potholes? How are you going to make congestion less bad? And I said, well, car parking is not really our bag, nor are potholes, thankfully. And making congestion not quite as bad as it is means some people have got to get out of their cars. And I think we're all really great at sitting in our cars in a queue of traffic, bemoaning the fact that there's lots of other people doing the same as we're doing. And we've got to make some really tough decisions, I think, over the course of the next few years if we're going to get proper modal shift in how people move around the county. I think it plays back into the post-COVID working patterns piece as well, because I think it's part of it is about how we look at our urban centres and how we reframe our urban centres, whether that's in our case Gloucester or Cheltenham, or whether it's our market towns. How do we get more people living in our urban centres so that either they can be genuine transport hubs to shift people out to employment, or they're living and working in the same place, and so they're a walk or a bike ride away from their employment. And I think some of those shifts we're probably going to need to grasp the nettle ourselves as Gloucestershire and start to move that forward, because a lot of what you will have heard, as I have nationally, not just from government but from others as well, is how do we get back to where we were, and that's not sustainable, frankly, and that's not going to put us on a journey to net zero. So I think there's some really tough decisions to be made around investments and around discouraging people from still pursuing the habits that they've pursued for some time, and encouraging people to take a much more environmentally friendly, physically active way of moving around the county.
Okay, I've got Rebecca next.
Matt, could I just
sorry, Colin.
Add to something you just said there before the point is lost. One thing we are doing at the moment, I think it's worth just noting, is we had a successful bid to the government for a rural transport scheme. There was only 17 awarded in the country. So we're actually, from the end of this year, we're setting it up as the year goes on. We are, as part of that successful bid, buying 4 fully accessible vehicles that will be operating on a demand responsive system, 2 in Forest of Dean and 2 in the Cotswolds. And I think something like that will really, really help, particularly younger people who want to get access to jobs and that sort of thing for the first time. What we know is that 26% of people in Forest of Dean and 46 or 48% of people in Cotswold actually live or don't live within walking distance of a bus stop, with a bus service is running once every 2 hours. Not a good service, but so you're not talking about being particularly well connected on public transport. So hence why we've gone for this demand responsive service. So it's basically, as someone described it the other day, is basically it's the bus service is equivalent to Uber, basically. for and obviously for young people, it's very, very, or anyone who hasn't got access to a car, it becomes a very and can't just get on a bike and ride because it's just too far. It does, hopefully it does start to help address that that rural isolation type issues.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Rebecca then.
Yeah, I wanted to follow on a bit from some of the comments that Pete Carr was making, actually. I mean, I first came across GFirst LEP through Cirencester College. I'm a board member there, and obviously, as you've mentioned, they're well connected with GFirst. And I've taken part in some of the entrepreneur day program that have been run in sort of the upper part of secondary schools, colleges, that sort of thing. And I realise it's very hard to predict in current circumstances, even though things are starting to open up, when that kind of program of activity can start taking place again. But I do think it's worth flagging how important it is, that kind of program. I mean, that for everybody else, they were sort of not quite Dragon's Den type activities, but days focused on STEM activities within generally the upper part of secondary schools, often focused on young women, encouraging them into technology-based careers to think through technology applications and come up with ideas and real-world applications for their ideas and present them. Really, really fantastic. Really fantastic days, actually, and very, very inspiring, both to see happening, and I think for the young people involved, and certainly in the Cotswolds, if not in wider Gloucestershire, we've got a really rich vein of technology businesses, micro businesses, small businesses, agritech, green technology, and obviously there's the developments happening at Cirencester College. We've got young people who are really interested in these careers, and potentially could be interested in these careers, and I'd really like to see those kind of programs getting up and running again, because they're so valuable to help inspire young people to think about a future that perhaps they hadn't considered was a possibility.
Are you happy for me to respond to that, Matt?
Yeah, please do.
Thanks very much for that feedback, Rebecca, and also a big thank you for taking part in that, because those only work with the involvement of volunteers such as yourself, and to actually support those sort of programs. And it's we worked hard to get a lot of businesses and business people to come in to actually support those sorts of programs. It's kind of $1 million question, and I'm sure David's probably smiling as well, because this is something we've wrestled with for a while, in that the work that we're doing now is really to sort of enhance. We've set up a careers hub in November, which is basically supporting the schools with their work on career strategies and on careers activities, and the big part of the feedback that we're getting through that, and also through some work that we're doing with Child Friendly Gloucestershire, is actually hearing that young people really valued that sort of input. So things like the practice interviews, the Dragon's Den work that you talked about, some of the other kind of careers inspiration work, and that direct contact and informal contact in some cases with people in particular careers, so that they can demystify those and actually see, picture themselves in those sort of roles, and ask the questions that they want answered about that. We're hearing loud and clear that that's really valuable. The challenge that we've got is that currently we're not funded to actually deliver that sort of activity, and what we were doing was kind of running that over and above what we were doing before with the team. So I think it's something that will be addressed, in that we'll need to come back to this, because we're strongly getting the message that it is really valuable. And we're also getting the message from young people that actually if schools are left to do that themselves, what happens is it feels quite disjointed and isn't part of a kind of broader careers programme. It's more of a, and this absolutely isn't about all schools doing this, but some of them do it more as a kind of a tick box exercise, and young people can't see the context, what it leads into. So I think it's a really timely reminder. So thanks for that, Rebecca. And let's say if I can come back to you at a later date on that when we've sort of established a little bit more where we might be able to fund it from.
Okay, thank you. Nikki, I've got you next.
Thank you, Chair. Can I go back to rail, please? There was some very good news there, but I didn't catch anything about the Forest of Dean. I'm wondering if there's any improvements at the Forest of Dean's plan, and particularly improvements in services and connection to Bristol through the Forest of Dean. Thank you.
I don't know if Colin, you want to come in on that one, or?
Yeah, I don't know whether I missed the first bit of the question or there was a bit of confusion, because I thought the lady said, sorry, actually I was even speaking, that there wasn't any direct mention of the Forest of Dean. Well, demand responsive service I was talking about, that was specifically for the Forest of Dean and Cotswolds. So that was the first aspect.
Sorry,
there.
was that rail?
No, that's
sorry. I started off with rail. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, that's probably what I missed in that case. Sorry, I do apologise. Yeah, the within the CMSP proposals, there will be additional, at least one service an hour, if not more, additional services. There was the service that will be coming down from Ashchurch within those proposals that will be going into Wales, down through Chepstow and out that way, down through the Forest of Dean. So there are improvements on that line as well that are scheduled. I know they're also looking about how to manage the interface into Bristol, but that's a very difficult question, because then if you go down and get to the Great West Rail line, you then have the problem that you're on the wrong side of the Severn Tunnel, which has capacity restraints in itself. So it's about how you actually make that work. But it's something we've asked to be looked at as part of those longer term proposals.
Thank you.
Chair, can I just quickly add the apologies?
Oh, sorry, yes, please, Simon. Yeah.
Thank you. Apologies for my lateness to the meeting, first of all.
No problem.
I'm aware that obviously there's quite a few new members around the virtual table, and a lot of what has been discussed this afternoon is on the transport side of things. I'm also aware that previously my team have presented to both this committee and indeed the Environment Scrutiny Committee on the local transport plan. Now, that's a key document in terms of the next 20 or so years and the transport infrastructure which is being proposed. I think as a minimum, if Sophie, could you take away an action, perhaps with the minutes, to send a link to the adopted local transport plan with my contact details, and if members have any specific queries, then they can certainly come back to me, or indeed the Scrutiny Committee might wish to receive a presentation on the local transport plan at some point in the future, because obviously we've done it before, albeit for different members, and I think quite a lot of today's questions could be answered through that way. Thank you.
That could be really useful. Yes, thank you. And then next, I've got Gina on the.
Yes,
Gina on the list.
good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. We now in the Cotswolds have got a sustainable transport officer who's going to be working through various plans, but we do have a serious problem with not having, obviously, the motorway, and certainly not much in the way of rail services. The population is well spread out, low density, so everybody reverts to the car. And I was going to bring up, and I'm so thrilled that we're going to have this, the trial of the, I think they're minibuses, aren't they, which are going to be on demand around the Borton area. I think it's going to be fantastic. I want to see the results of that soon. And I think it's the sort of answer which we've got to be heading to in our area. I'm taking actually our business manager around a tour of the North Cotswold businesses, industrial parks and things. And it really makes me very conscious that very few of them are actually near. I mean, they're barely bicycleable too. You could walk, but even cycling, especially in the winter, is out of the question. So at the moment, we are still stuck with the old motor car, and we'd all like to see less use of that. So any support that we can get in just outside the main, I know the M5 corridor is frightfully important, but I know that the other districts which don't have quite such good transport infrastructure would value as much support as we could have. So thank you, Colin and David, for your bits about it, but we still need more, I think. Thank you.
Oh, that's great, thanks for that. Okay, I haven't got any other people asking questions or anything like that. We sort of had a good discussion around things on around obviously David's item on G First LEP, which I know we've ranged a bit onto some of the other areas as well. So I think that sort of brings us nice onto Colin's area, if that's okay, Colin, and talk about Gloucestershire County Council and from your side of things, really.
Sure. Okay. We did a report in January this year to GGEC, which outlined what the county's role was in our approach in trying to drive forward the economic recovery during and post pandemic. That identified three main themes, and it's the themes that we at GCC are directly responsible for, that we have direct control, so we can actually make a real difference on those in those areas. So the three themes were first of all, people, place and connectivity. So that's things like working with VCS schools, colleges and businesses to identify and provide equipment to level up the digital divide. Understand how employers and employees work in the short, medium and long term, and understand how communities will need to interact going forward, and making those connections with libraries and other facilities. Now capitalising on the county's ambitions for improved access to high quality broadband, and that's basically rolling out broadband to those areas that haven't got a commercial offer, where that the market itself won't supply because it's too expensive or they can't make money from it, where we're allowed to intervene because state aid doesn't apply in those situations. We can intervene and use our relationship with Gloucestershire to step in and upgrade and provide improved connectivity in terms of broadband, etc., and fast connections. The second theme is skills and employment, and that is really, really important for the county, that the identification of skills, both through analysis work and also feedback via the LEP in terms of businesses, so we can actually put together a skills strategy, which Pete will be talking about in a minute, Pete Carr, around how we address the skills deficit, how we make sure that young people can access work, how we can make sure those people that lose their jobs mid-career are able to, and maybe furloughed at the moment, how they re-enter work maybe in a different area, and how we can support that. And one things we've already put in place there is the Employment Skills Hub, which is almost like a sort of, you can visit it both virtually and actually, and we're bringing adult education together with all the various elements of the skills offered, from apprenticeships through to support for people who are disadvantaged or disabled, right the way through, where we can sign people to jobs and kickstart and apprenticeships that are available, where we can identify what the skills deficit is for them, because quite often even to get onto an apprenticeship you need maths and English at levels 1 and 2, and we're finding more and more jobs requiring that, and it's no, and I think it's no coincidence that at the moment the adult education have every one of their courses up to July for maths and English levels 1 and 2 are absolutely rammed. They're completely full. So with a whole new batch of cohort coming out during June and July, if you're going on to university, it doesn't affect you. If you're going on to college and you've already got, but if you're coming out of school with low education qualifications, and you suddenly start to realise at that point in time that you haven't even got maths and English at levels 1 and 2, and you're needing that to get into an apprenticeship or even access a job, what do you do? So we're actually going to run summer school this year, specifically with focused on bringing people up to level 1 and 2 for maths and English, again, so they can access employment as quickly as possible. That's not just school leavers, obviously, because I think from September onwards, as the furlough starts to unwind, we'll find a whole cohort of people who won't have jobs anymore, who will be mid-career, who maybe got jobs at times when, they were low-skilled jobs and they worked their way up. And now they find they need to get a new job and they need maths and English at levels 1 and 2. I haven't got it. So that facility needs to be available to them too. So it's about a whole package of support round identifying where people can go. It's going to be set up in Gloucestershire initially, but it'll be available both virtually and you can walk in, drop in. But once we've got it up and running, our aim is to then be able to then take that out to the districts, possibly the libraries, and have a few of the team going out so that we can take that support mechanism into the districts rather than having to bring people to Gloucestershire to gain that knowledge, particularly if you think about 17-year-olds and what I just said about buses and rural isolation. It makes it even more important that they can that we can get that information to them and rather than expect them to come into Gloucester to get that information. So that's something we're working on, and obviously very important for us on that side. But and obviously skilling up the whole population where we can and providing that support going forward. I'll leave Pete to cover that in probably a bit more detail. The other thing obviously is infrastructure, economy and growth is our third theme, which is identifying the spend in the local economy, so we can, and we already started doing this, we've already got the portal ready. So for a standing start, we're doing quite well to develop a social value model. So how do we get more for our pound that we spend? How do we make sure, for example, if we do letting a big contract, that that contractor or that procurement ensures that they, for every £1 million we spend with them, say it's Junction 10, for every £1 million we spend on a £250 million project, they have to provide one apprentice place or something like that. So we're starting to get some real value out of the work, out of our pound spend. But also joining it up with the anchor institutions as well. So all of that really being strengthened. Obviously looking at the longer term, delivering the growth agenda for the county, looking at where we can improve, like Junction 10, like the A417, the missing link, like Junction 9, enabling the garden towns to take place and the growth to take place. But as well as that, obviously, as I've already said, about lobbying for improvements to rail. So all of that infrastructure economy, not instant fixes, but they create the base for longer term growth. And I already mentioned sort of as part of that recovery plan, focuses on social value. We already set a policy up that we go into CLT and then on to cabinet very shortly. We've already had meetings with health, NHS, because obviously if you think about spend the county and the districts do, you pull that with the spending of the NHS, you start to be able to have some real clout in terms of what you ask for in terms of that social value type of work. Covering things like inclusive employment as part of that Works and Skills Hub. Things like Works for Me is a pilot aimed at young people who are currently not in education, employment or training. And it targets those from BAME communities as they have a higher risk of becoming NEET. And not only they become NEET, but a lot of the research shows that once you start off in that in that way, you end up the rest of your life forever going boom and bust, into job, out of job. So it's actually about addressing that at as early a stage possible. The Kickstart program we alluded to, we've got 400 job opportunities there. Inclusivity Works is a new initiative to demonstrate the benefits of having a fully inclusive workforce for employers. It's created by the GEM project, the employability program, helping local people with barriers to get into work. So again, that's support, so wraparound support, which again will be very much a focus of the new employment and skills hub. And then the other thing we've started to roll out actually as part of the economic recovery plan that we secured funding for is the innovation labs, which will be rolled out. We already have one. It's based on at Colford and works really, really effectively. But we are looking to now roll that out to Tewkesbury Library, Stroud, and Cheltenham Library. Gloucestershire will be having theirs very shortly. That'll be the next one to go in, followed by Tewkesbury, Stroud, and Cheltenham. And we're just taking a breath at the moment because we've got funding to put one into the Cotswolds, but now we're reflecting and thinking that probably one is not going to be enough for the Cotswolds. So we're looking at possibly putting two innovation labs into the Cotswolds, one to the north and one to the south. And we just need to look at how best to do that, how to fund that. Innovation labs, if you're not aware, and we already employed the lab technicians to support those. Now, I dare say if you've not heard me speak about this before, I know there's quite a lot of new people. They're quite amazing. If you get a chance to go to Colford, they're sort of groundbreaking. And literally, the lab in the library has everything from 3D printers, the scanners, 3D scanners, the latest IT technology, so that you can gain some serious experience on that sort of technology that otherwise you wouldn't. But we also have things like training aids. So we have got a series of caterpillars, electronic caterpillars, that you can teach children at 5 years of age how to do coding in computing. And at 7 years of age, there's packages there to get them to build basic a computer. And then at 12 years of age, we've got other packages there that actually are more complex IT construction work and laptops and that sort of thing. So it gives one, but it also supports SMEs who probably wouldn't have access to that type of equipment to come in and use the 3D printers and 3D scanners for product development. And also, for anything else they need that IT information for, and ability to access that, the materials there. And that is supported by each of the libraries also have full IP access electronically. So if you're an SME and you want to check up on patents and copyright and anything like that, you can do that in your local library at one of the innovation labs, and actually at any local library where I hope to run it out to. And also resource information on marketing, resource information on all the different companies in the country. And so effectively, if you want to find out about competitors, if you want to get into a particular market, you can go and research that at the library. Or if you've got a job, for example, with somebody, you want to find out about that company before you go, then you can get that. You can carry out that research there. So it's right across the board that we're trying to get that sort of information and support. And like I was saying about for youngsters, bringing them through with that accepted IT training at a very early age, and just acceptance of coding and that sort of thing. When we talk about Cyber Park, let's not create Cyber Park that all it does is draw people in from outside, because we haven't got the skills in the county to fill the jobs that are created for the new Cyber Park. What we need to do is make sure that our young people can access that themselves, by making sure they've got that necessary interest and skill from an early age. And then the other thing that I think is really important from a county perspective is to take that step back strategic view, and enable that to be used and provide the information that can help GGEC and help the environmental scrutiny look at where the weaknesses are as we come out of the pandemic. And so what we've done is create a dashboard, which is quite an easy read across dashboard. And if I can grab 5 to 10 minutes, Matt, the reason Kate has been invited today, Kate Martin, and she's pulled this together for me. And it's a dashboard that I'm hoping, this is just current as of Friday afternoon. But what we're hoping to do is in future meetings have it presented to environmental scrutiny to actually inform, because I think sometimes in the past, environmental scrutiny members have been left sort of like, well, what is the issue? How do I get to where, what are the challenges that need to be made, and haven't got the information to hand. And I just thought this would be a really good way of providing that base information to help you decide where you want to turn your attention or where you feel things should be looked at in the future. So if I pass over to Kate now to run you through the dashboard, and you can give us your feedback about whether you think this is in the right part, we've got it right, is there anything else you feel we should be including that you'd like to see. It'll be your dashboard that we'll be also using for other things as well, in trying to get that information to people to make informed decisions in the future. Kate.
Thank you very much, Colin. I will just share my screen so you can all see it, but it should have been circulated to you. So hopefully you can now see the dashboard. So this dashboard doesn't contain all indicators related to the economy. It's those indicators that are timely and give us understanding of the impact COVID's had. A lot of the economic data we have isn't yet covering the COVID period, so that's not been included in the dashboard. We also haven't included things in there that's only updated on an annual basis because we want this to give you that regular idea about what's going on. So the dashboard begins by giving some headline figures around unemployment, job postings, furlough, self-employment income support scheme, total benefit claimants, NEETs, universal credit and apprenticeships. It then goes on to look at each one of those in a bit more detail, starting with unemployment. So this measure of unemployment is based on those claiming job seekers allowance or universal credit and they're searching for work. There's a caveat down there that the government's response to COVID-19 means that some people are claiming universal credit but are still employed. So there is that slight caveat, but it's the most up-to-date and most timely information we have around unemployment. So as you can see, in April 21, there were 17,190 people claiming unemployment-related benefits, which equates to around 4.5% of 16 to 64-year-olds. Now, the top graph shows the trend in unemployment claimants since January 2019. And what you can see is the claimant rate in Gloucestershire, which is the black line, increased considerably between March 2020 and May 2020. It then dropped slightly between May and June before increasing again a little bit in the summer. It then fell between September and January, increasing slightly in February with lockdown 3. Since February, it's now been declining, and that trend is seen at a county, regional and district level. To put that into perspective, the claimant count is now 119% higher than in March 2020. We have 4.5% of 16 to 64-year-olds claiming unemployment-related benefits, which compares to 2% in March 2020. So we have seen an inconsiderable increase in those people claiming unemployment-related benefits. The bottom graph shows the age profile of claimants, and you can see all age groups have been affected. Those aged 18 to 24 account for the largest proportion of unemployed people. But that's consistent to what was the picture in February 2020. What we've seen is that the pandemic appears to have exacerbated existing trends, with that age group always having been the highest proportion of claimants. Moving on to the next slide, which looks at those people who are furloughed or have claimed the coronavirus job retention scheme. So the latest data takes us up to the 30th of April, and at that point there were 30,300 people furloughed, which equates to 10.8% of employments. Now the bottom left graph shows the trend in the take-up of coronavirus job retention scheme. Again, Gloucestershire is the black line, and what you can see is those people claiming the coronavirus job retention scheme fell from January to October. It then increased when we had lockdown 2, and since it then increased again in January, February time, but since then we've seen it coming down again. So we now have 30,000 people claiming coronavirus job retention scheme, which is around 10.8%, which is in line with the national and regional average. The districts followed a similar pattern. Gloucester has the lowest take-up rate at 9%, and Cheltenham has the second highest at 12%, but the highest, you can see by that blue line, is Cotswold at around 12%. And Cotswold has been noticeably higher than the county, regional and national averages since 31st of October. The two graphs on the right-hand side compare how Gloucestershire is performing against some of its neighbours. So the first graph looks at how Gloucestershire compares to what's called statistical neighbours, which are areas across the country which are similar in terms of their makeup and characteristics. So they might not be geographic neighbours, but they're areas we're similar to. And you can see we rank 6th out of 15 of our statistical neighbours. We have a lower take-up rate in West Sussex, North Yorkshire, Devon, Essex and Worcestershire. When compared to our nearest neighbours, which is the bottom graph, you can see we've got the second highest take-up rate, with only Worcestershire having a higher take-up rate. And that's largely due to the type of occupations we have within our county. So we have a higher proportion of people employed in things like accommodation and food, and that tourism hospitality sector than places like Swindon, South Gloucestershire, Oxfordshire. We've recently started getting information around coronavirus job retention scheme take up by sector, and that's what this graph shows. And you can see, unsurprisingly, accommodation and food services is the sector with the highest, that accounts for the highest proportion of people who are furloughed, with 30% of people furloughed working in that sector. That's followed by wholesale and retail, with around 16% of people who are furloughed falling into that sector. Generally, Gloucestershire pretty much follows the national average, but we've got a higher proportion of people employed who are furloughed in accommodation, food services and manufacturing, which is largely because these sectors account for a higher proportion of employment in the county than nationally. Now, as a result, we've got lower proportions of people furloughed in some of the other sectors, notably arts, entertainment and recreation, and administrative and support services. This slide then looks at the Self-Employment Income Support Scheme, and much of it is focused on those claims made to wave 4 of the Self-Employment Income Support Scheme, which opened on the 26th of April. And it's a snapshot as of the 9th of May. So we're likely to see that increase as time goes on and more people can apply. What it showed is there were 14,900 claims made to the Self-Employment Income Support Scheme, which is around 44% of the eligible cohort. Now, the bottom graph looks at the average value of claims in the green bars and the take-up rate in the blue line. What we can see is Gloucestershire has a lower take-up rate than England. So if you look at the blue line, you can see that. But the average value of claims is higher in Gloucestershire than England. And that's, again, likely to be a result of the type of businesses we've got within the county. So they're potentially more higher earners and therefore making higher claims than nationally. And that's really shown in Cotswolds in particular. Cotswolds is fairly similar to other districts in terms of its take-up rates, in line with Stroud, and actually slightly below some other districts like Gloucester and Cheltenham. But it does have the highest average value of claims. And also you can see when looking at the Forest of Dean has a similar take-up rate, but a much lower level of average value claims, showing again that potentially the earnings in the Forest of Dean's businesses might be slightly lower, explaining some of that discrepancy. The top graph looks at claims since the Self-Employment Income Support Scheme began, and overall Stroud has got the highest number of claims and the highest value of claims. This slide looks at something slightly different. So this slide looks at what's called unique active job postings, and these are job postings collected from online sources. So it won't capture postings which aren't advertised online, which might result in undercounting for some occupations. But what we can see is when you look at that trend, job postings saw a real fall after the first lockdown, and it's taken quite a while for them to get back up to pre-pandemic levels. But at county level, job postings are now back to pre-pandemic levels. At district level, there's quite a lot of differences going on there. So if you look at the pinky line, which is Cheltenham, and the purple line, which is Gloucester, job postings are actually still below pre-pandemic levels. In Tewkesbury, really interestingly, Tewkesbury's seen a really high rate of growth in job postings since January and is now significantly higher than pre-pandemic levels, whereas in Forest, Cotswold and Stroud, they're fairly similar to those pre-pandemic levels. So we've got a very mixed bag there in terms of job postings at a district level. The bottom graph looks at those occupations that have seen the greatest growth or greatest decline between February 2020 and April 21. So the red bars are those occupations that have seen the greatest decline, and some of it isn't surprising to you. So you see we've got chefs in there, we've also got sales occupations listed in there. It also shows it's had an impact on a variety of different occupations. We've also got things like solicitors appearing in there. Then the green bars are those occupations that have seen the greatest growth. And again, some of them won't be surprising. We've got things like care workers and home carers seeing some substantial growth. We've also seen substantial growth in things related to IT. So we've got IT specialist managers appearing in there, program and software development. And we've also seen quite a lot of growth recently in occupations related to construction. So we've got elementary construction occupations, plumbers and heating and ventilating engineers, civil engineers appearing in there, suggesting that construction is back on its feet and is starting to do well again. This slide now looks at overall benefit claimants. This data isn't as up to date as some of the other measures, so the latest is for November 2020. And this contains information about all benefit claimants, regardless of what benefit they're including. So it will include people that may be claiming just housing benefit or carers allowance, income support, but it's of those who are working age. So in November 2020, we had 73,132 working age individuals claiming benefits, which is around 19% of 16 to 64-year-olds. When you look at that graph, it looks very similar to what we saw when we looked at the unemployment rate, a significant increase between February and May 2020, after which it's been fairly steady, increased a little bit and now levelling off. And the image on the right shows the makeup of that change. So you can see that total benefit claimants increased by around 20,790 during the period February 20 to November 20. Now, much of that, in fact, was driven by those people claiming universal credit, which actually showed an increase of 21,789 people. Those people claiming other benefits actually fell. So those people claiming benefits other than universal credit reduced. That might be because they transitioned onto universal credit, or it could be that they are now have actually stopped claiming benefits. Unfortunately, we don't have the data to tell us that, but it is an interesting picture. This slide focuses purely on universal credit benefit claimants. So you can see in April 21, we had 45,819 people claiming universal credit, and these include people who are searching for work and those who aren't. And that means we've got around 12% of 16 to 64-year-olds claiming universal credit. Again, the graph looks very similar to those we've seen previously, with an increase between March and May 2020, reflecting the impact of lockdown. What's interesting is the graph on the right, which breaks payments of universal credit down by conditionality regime. So this is basically what the DWP says claimants have to do. So you can see all conditionality groups increased. Those that had the greatest increase were those that had to search for work. So when they were told by the DWP, you've got to search for work. But you can also see that we've seen an increase in those people who have no work requirements, which might be that they're not expected to work because of a health or caring responsibility. We're also seeing an increase in people working with requirements, which means they've got a job, but they might not be doing the hours or having the pay that they need. So the DWP have said you've got to try and improve your working conditions and get a better paid job or more hours. So you can see it's affecting a range of different people, not just those who are searching for work. Moving on to the last couple of slides, this shows information about those 16 to 18-year-olds who are not in education, employment or training. There's 426 of those in March 21. The caveat with this is these figures are purely based on those people who Gloucestershire Youth Support Team know about. It doesn't take into account those who we don't know their outcomes of. So this is likely to be an undercount, but it gives you an idea. And you can see that there was an increase following lockdown 1 and the pandemic, but it hasn't seen such a significant impact as some of the other measures. Generally, at a county level, we're almost at pre-pandemic level. At district level, the picture's mixed, with levels in Cheltenham and Tewkesbury now in line with the pre-pandemic level, whereas in Gloucester and Cotswolds, they are significantly higher. And this is final slide around apprenticeships. And apprenticeships is something where the picture is still emerging. So we've only got part of the data for 2020, 2021. The data only goes up to quarter 2. But what you can see is when you look at apprenticeship starts in 2019-20, they were slightly lower than the previous year, which is likely to be to some extent impacted by COVID. So far, it's looking as though for 2020, 2021, that may continue, but we haven't got all of the data for that full year yet, so we can't say definitively what's going to happen. So it's a bit of a case of watch this space and see how it evolves. So that's a very quick whistle-stop tour of the dashboard. I'm happy to take questions if anyone has them. And I'll stop sharing my screen.
Sorry, Matt, we can't hear you.
Sorry, it was only a matter of time before I managed to mute myself by accident. So I was going to say thank you very much. It's been a really useful run through. I think obviously with the COVID stuff, we're very used to getting the sort of the health statistics and that sort of thing. But yeah, to kind of get the economic ones in that sense, you know, the actual impact it's having on jobs and that sort of thing, it's, yeah, I think that's been a really useful context setting.
But Chair, can I just on that basis, if people are, I don't know, this is just really an introduction, like we've just literally just pulled together in the last week. You know, so really, you know, does it float your boat? So in terms of members, you know, does it do what we intend to do, is provide that information to give you the ability to start to make decisions on informed decisions from that information going forward? Is it anything else that you'd like to see included? I mean, we ran it through past GJIC this morning. They've asked for a couple of things. They've asked for, could we put a slide in, possibly on social value? I think that's going to be difficult, but we'll look into it. Could we put a slide in on business success failure? We can again look at that in terms of, you know, the businesses that fail or don't fail and how long they last for. And also, it was also asked if we can possibly put something in about Kickstart to see how well Kickstart is taking off and is going forward. So there are things. I don't want to make it too complex. I don't want too many slides. It's really about getting the information across to you as simply as possible, so you can start to track and see what's happening. And obviously, Chair, we haven't had this discussion, but and obviously, if you're happy with it, then bring it back to each environmental scrutiny committee at some point, so we can spend 10 minutes just looking where we got to on the data, and people can monitor and look at that information.
I think that sounds, from my point of view, I think it's really useful. Would be a very useful thing. But I'll open up to the Gina. I've got you first on the list.
Oh, hello. Yes, Colin, thank you again for something really useful. I think it's brilliant. All I'm going to say, and maybe it's because I have to wear my specs and all that, but it's quite difficult sometimes following the lines for each different district or whatever it is, especially when you've got the dotted lines for the whole country and something else. I don't know if there's some other way. I know that they often will follow each other quite closely, but it is quite difficult to distinguish. So I think it's brilliant, but I would just like to be able to see it a little bit more clearly. Thank you.
Thank you. Noted. We'll try and improve on that.
And Chloe, I've got you next.
Yeah, I thought that was great. Thank you. I'm an accountant, so I'm a data nerd, so much appreciated. I just wondered, not now, but as we move sort of beyond COVID, and so the focus is a bit less on business recovery, whether we might maybe get something in around green business growth and something. I appreciate that's difficult to measure, and as David said earlier, pinpointing exactly what is a green business is difficult, but perhaps some measure of how we're making progress into green jobs would be great.
That's something we can look at, and we've been talking to someone that provides us with some data about how we might be able to capture green job postings. So it's something we've definitely got on our radar going forward.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks.
That's great. And then Paul McCloskey.
Thanks, Matt. I thought it was fantastic. I think seeing the trends is really important. The area I just wonder whether there was any hope of something in the future is about the high street and the number of empty retail premises and so forth, because there's been such a huge impact. And are we going to rebuild it back by converting all the retail premises into accommodation, or what are we going to do? Yeah. So if that's not too difficult, we'll have one of those, please.
We'll see what we can do. It's something that a lot of districts capture in slightly different ways, so we'll have to have a look and see across the county how we can pull that together. But yeah, we'll bear it in mind and see what we can do. Thank you.
It's worth probably saying that we haven't got the money to go out and do first-hand research to support this. So what we have to do is obviously some information we can get. Although that information is actually current as of Friday afternoon, some of it was probably 4 to 6 weeks old, because that's how long it takes to get back from DWP and others. So there's a lag time. And likewise, there may be ways to do it. I can think of ways to doing that, which would be using rates and things like that. But again, that won't be an instant picture. There'll be quite a delay there, because you've got to wait for the business to shut up, for the rates then to change, things like that. So, we have not got the resources to go out and keep measuring and that sort of thing all the time. So there are things we can do, but they won't be. This was designed to be as quick as we could in terms of getting that information to you, so it's as current as we possibly can. Maybe that sort of thing we could do maybe once a year or once every 6 months, because of the lag time and getting that sort of collecting that sort of data together.
That's great, thank you. Any other questions? I can't see any of the hands or anything. Paul Baker.
Not on the dashboard. I want to ask Colin something. Shall I come back and wait for that, or?
No, I think we're there. So
Okay.
Please carry on.
Okay. Just Colin, just quickly on faster Gloucestershire and high quality broadband, which is obviously really important. Particularly important now where people are working from home, of course. Are we focusing purely on businesses when we're talking about faster broadband, or are we looking at black spots in residential areas too?
We're looking at both. We're looking at areas of the county that haven't got access, because effectively, invariably what it's about is that there isn't a commercial proposition, and therefore sometimes we'll identify an area that hasn't got that connectivity because they don't think it's a commercial proposition. The next thing we do is we actually contact the known companies like BT and see if they are willing to do it. And if they're not, then we will intervene, because arguably we can't intervene on a commercial proposition, because then that would be I said it earlier.
Sort of state aid.
State aid, yeah, thank you, state aid. But if there's not a commercial position, then we can go in and we're doing. Sometimes it takes different forms. We've grant aided before a commercial proposition. I think that was in the Cotswolds. But equally, and that was direct. Other times we use our contacts to bring companies in to create the connections up to people's houses and their businesses, and they can then pay and connect into that.
Matt, can I just come back on that just quickly, because it's probably relevant to all of us. We often have areas in our patches where there's really bad issues. Colin, how do we as individual councillors address this? Is there a website I can look at to see where an area might be coming on stream, or do I report it to? Who do I report it to? How do we progress those sort of areas?
I'm going to look now to Andrew and say, how's it best to deal with that? Because Andrew looks after the Gloucestershire programme.
Okay, we've got on our Councillor Baker, on our Gloucestershire broadband site, the website, which I can send the link through to Sophie to pass on to all members. But on there is a checker, so you can either put your individual residential property in there, postcode, or a business one, and it will give you where they are in the plan in terms of if they've already been enabled. We're trying to give sort of investment or speeds of sort of those under 30 megabits. So that's where we focused a lot of our public sector intervention. But you'll probably see those of you who are in urban areas, you're pretty lucky at the moment. There's about 6 or 7 of the suppliers all putting in major commercial investment plans. So besides obviously our Gloucestershire rollout plan, we have encouraged businesses to put new commercial delivery where they see it as a sort of beneficial, but also we've plugged the gap with our plans as well. So look on the website first. It will give you an indication of where they are, but obviously that this is about infrastructure. Obviously what we don't do is individual services. So if there are people who are complaining about the current level, often it's a case of a call to action to look at, the infrastructure is there, but it's their service is not that, isn't sufficient for their needs. So we encourage people to look at contacting an ISP and getting a better service, because often we've actually enabled it with that piece of infrastructure. So, and on the website, there are lots of ISPs as well. So it gives information about, those if they want to look at a new one. But certainly if you've got some, areas where they feel that their broadband isn't sufficient, then drop me an email with the individual postcode addresses, and then obviously the team can pick it up from there.
Thank you.
Okay, I can't see any other hands then. So moving on, the next we've got on the list, just scroll up, it's Mike next. Just to talk about Gloucestershire, the Economic Growth, the Joint Committee. Just to, yeah, sorry, I don't know if you, yeah, we'll hand over to Mike to talk through that one.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Matt. This is an interesting one for me because with this committee, when I looked at the membership, there's a lot of new members, i.e. new members full stop. There's a lot of new members to the county council who are already on the districts, and there are a lot of members who have been on this committee before. So pitching this is quite difficult, really. Also, Gillian's covered a few of the points around the joint committee I was going to make as well. So I thought I'd make some comments, Chair, really just on 6 issues, and I'm conscious of the time. We've been going for nearly 2 hours now. So the first bit was some general comments of introduction. I then talk about the local planning authorities aspect and how that impacts economic development generally, with some further comments around COVID recovery and what we've been doing there. Some comments around the joint committee and some points about how that works and where it came from. And then to round off, just some comments about the Office of Support. And I just thought that might help, rather than go through lots and lots of information with you, that it might help just give you some context about where this committee works and how it fits with the various organisations that make it up. If that would be helpful, I'll keep going. Thank you for the nod, Chair.
Please do.
So in terms of because I'm conscious that on the agenda it sort of said includes the role of the district councils. So this is a bit of a mixed bag of a presentation. As members know, we've got 6 district councils in Gloucestershire. Just as a small point, some of you will absolutely know this, others may not. But the district council is a legal classification of a level of councils in the country's local government system. We're all district councils. It's just that some have royal charters to be boroughs and cities, and effectively they have mayors. So that's the only difference. So whether it's a city council, a borough council, or a district council, collectively we are the district councils in law. We are the second tier of local government. There are 3 tiers if you include the towns and parishes, and incidentally they're all parish councils, whether a town or a parish council as well. So it's a little bit of local government structure there in terms of law. Because we're local at districts, we focus clearly on our local areas, on our districts. That brings, when we come to working together, some sensitivities. Sometimes we compete. Sometimes we're competing for government money. Sometimes we compete for various other reasons, like, dare I say, politics. And so there are some interesting areas when we start to work together. But, and this is a really important but, the one thing we've realised in Gloucestershire is that we work best when we work in effective partnerships. And as districts, we cannot work without effective partnerships. So as far as the economy is concerned, the effective partners for the districts are very much the county council and very much G1 LEP, and all districts in Gloucestershire work very closely with those partners. And in terms of the documents that we might have within the county, I guess for this committee, there are three. Two have been mentioned already this afternoon. One is the local industrial strategy. The other one is the local transport plan, and the one that didn't get mentioned is our local plans. And district councils, as the local planning authorities, are the authorities that plan for growth within the county, and that is a massive responsibility. It's incredibly costly to do, but and we do that through our local plans. There are 4 local plans because Cotswold, Stroud, and the Forest each have their own, and then Tewkesbury, Cheltenham and Gloucester work together on a core strategy for the JCS area. If you don't know quite how important those are, and I'm sure a lot of members around this table do, but the existing adopted plans with a plan period from 2011 to 2031 plan to deliver 61,500 homes across the county. That is a massive amount of homes. In addition to that, we plan to deliver 340 hectares of employment land, which basically equates to over 52,000 jobs in that plan period. That is important stuff in terms of the future economic growth of this county. We're all at various stages now as local planning authorities working on the next iteration of our plans, which will roll that time period out to 2041 for the most part. And then roughly, because clearly those plans are still being worked on, but they look like bringing forward a further 30,000 new homes and about 140 hectares of employment land, which equates to another 18,000 jobs. So if you didn't doubt really the importance of local planning, that just gives you some basic figures in terms of what those local plans mean for the economy and the communities of the county. In terms of that, I really would echo the comments that Colin made earlier about the need for long-term integration of transport, and in particular public transport and green transport and modal shift into our local planning processes. We are somewhat hampered because the government has in the past been quite focused on plan periods, when a lot of this planning actually takes longer than a single plan period. Some of the plans that we're looking at, the big schemes, the Golden Valley scheme in Cheltenham, the Golden Valley Garden Community, Tewkesbury Garden Town, some of the other major strategic allocations within the county are long-term delivery plans. And so another area that we are working together with the County Council on is that long-term view for Gloucestershire that stretches across more than one plan. And we at the moment, the document is called a Statement of Common Ground, which is very much policy-based. The aim is to try and get to an agreed broad way forward for development in Gloucestershire out beyond 2050, so we can really start to integrate where we're putting housing and employment growth with the transport system to make sure we get that right in a way that we provide effective transport systems for communities to use to get to work and so on. So it's really important. So that's the importance of the district council's role as strategic local planning authorities. District councils also, along with the county councils, have responsibilities for economic development. Interestingly, that's a discretionary service. One would argue that you'd think it should be mandatory for local authorities, but as district councils, all our district councils in Gloucestershire see economic growth as a priority. However, we approach it in different ways, and that is because the communities and the business communities across Gloucestershire do vary. So when you look from different districts, we will focus on different things depending on the needs and the aspirations of our own districts. So there will be variations there, and there's variations on the way that economic development function within districts is actually structured and staffed. Some authorities have sections called economic development sections. They're easy to find because of that badge. Others have wider functions or slightly different functions, but the function is there and always regarded as very important. In terms of COVID recovery, that has been a massive work for district councils and the county council and the LEP going forward, and I have to say I think the partnership across the county has been amazing. And if you just tot up just as one figure, members will be aware that the district councils have been paying out government grant aid to businesses throughout the COVID pandemic and still will be going forward. But to date, as an estimate, the district councils across Gloucestershire have paid out around £200 million to around 40,000 businesses in Gloucestershire to help keep them afloat. And that the logistics of that enterprise across the county has been terrific. And, you know, I don't think we should forget just the role of the districts in terms of that. Turning to the well, I'll stay with just COVID for a moment if I can. We had a presentation this morning at the Joint Committee where all the partners, the LEP and the districts and the county, gave some updates around what was happening with COVID. I'm not going to go through all that clearly, but what I did offer to the Joint Committee was to pull that together, not to wait for the minutes, to pull that together as a single summary document and circulate it to the members of the Joint Committee. And I would offer that, Chair, to this committee as well, so that there's a summary of all the activity that you would that has been going on and that will be going on within the county to focus on recovery, and I hope that might be helpful. Turning to the Joint Committee, the Joint Committee goes back to about 2015, and we were asked to set up the Joint Committee when the initial government devolution programme was around. I won't say too much about that, but basically we were asked to have a decision-making body that was capable of making binding decisions in partnership for Gloucestershire around the economy and growth. So at that point, the Joint Committee was set up, and this committee was set up at the same time to provide the joint scrutiny arrangements for that Joint Committee and to work in partnership together. So that's where the two committees came from, and they've been working ever since. The functions of the Joint Committee really, I guess, are around the exchange of information, around partnership and coordination, and also around decisions on funding, particularly around the Strategic Economic Development Fund, which it comes from business rates, and the business rates pool, which was established by the Joint Committee and the partners some time ago. And as a result of that business rates pool, many millions of pounds have been kept in Gloucestershire from business rates that we wouldn't have otherwise kept. So very much an important committee, and has made a lot of decisions in the past that have been very helpful around business rates and funding, and also, as I say, around things like coordination of bids for funding around Gloucestershire. Quite often when we have competing bids to government for the county, it can help to have a forum where we have a discussion, so we try not to unnecessarily compete with each other for government funding into the county, and the Joint Committee is a source for that. Just finally then, Chair, talking about the support, the Joint Committee and this group is supported by a body which I chair called the Senior Officer Group. That is made up of representatives from G1 LEP, from Gloucestershire County Council and all the districts at senior level. It tends to be people who are involved in economic growth and or planning, and the work of that group is to support the agendas and the work of the two committees, really. So you have a cross-county officer group that works through these processes with you. So I hope that gives you some idea of the context in which you operate, and a little bit about the importance of the district councils, and even more so about the importance of working together in effective partnership to make sure that Gloucestershire gets the best deal going from anything that's going from government, and that we support each other in making sure our county is as great a place as it can be. Thank you, Chair.
Well, that's great. Thank you very much. Any questions, any comments from anyone on that one? I can't see any hands raised or anything like that. I know we've obviously been sort of covered elements of that in some of the other sections as well. So I don't know if there's no questions specifically on that item. Can't see anyone indicating. In that case, thank you very much, Mike, and we'll move on to the next item then. So this is all around the skills agenda. Again, I know Pete, sorry, I found you now. Sorry, yeah. So I know Pete Carr's going to talk to this one. We've sort of touched on elements of that already, but I'll hand over to you now, Pete, to run through the skills
Thanks,
agenda.
Matt. Apologies, I've had to pull the blind down, so I now look like I'm in a witness protection programme. Just to say, I'll keep this brief because I appreciate battle fatigue is probably setting in. I just really wanted to flag with you three things. One was just how we operate in the skills space, and by we I mean the royal we that Colin and David and Mike have all referred to. So this is very much cooperative work between the organisations. Secondly, just around the specific challenges, I suppose, of the skills landscape, and it was really in diagrammatical form, just to give you a sense of the complexity of the landscape and why sometimes it takes longer to actually make some changes than we'd like. And then thirdly, as Colin was saying, that the proposals that are now being taken forward to try and reduce some of the complexity and actually have a more streamlined landscape locally, whereby we were actually planning to operate an employment and skills hub. So I'll just touch on all three of those, and then if anyone's got any particular questions, feel free to ask. Starting point, as I put in the paper, is really just to sort of explain a little bit more about how we operate in this. So it depends really what's needed. So some of it, as you've heard already, is very much around strategic planning and actually sort of leading in terms of the particular thought processes and helping the providers, the skills providers, actually plan. Some of the kind of clear developments around that are around the green agenda, as we've talked about earlier, and the other elements of the local industrial strategy. So what we're trying to do is actually link the skills strategy work to that. The sort of skills agenda, if you like, is taken forward by a separate group called the Gloucestershire Skills Advisory Panel. And every area, every LEP area is actually asked to have one of those. Basically, it's a forum that brings together employers, skills training providers, including the schools, colleges, higher education, and then some of the key agencies involved, like the Careers and Enterprise Company, DWP, and the Education Skills Funding Agency. And so we actually work very closely with them, and subgroups of that are actually working on a number of aspects, including skills strategy work and moving forward our economic recovery work on employment and skills as well. There are some situations, as Rebecca was talking about earlier, that we actually deliver directly. So, as Colin said, we've got teams like the adult education team at GCC and the inclusive employment team. And similarly at GFirst, we've actually got a team specifically working on the Careers Hub support for schools. That really focuses on providing, as I was mentioning earlier, some support around schools' career strategies and how they work with local employers, local businesses to actually stimulate the careers education and make those links between young people at an age, hopefully, which helps to sort of steer their thinking around which jobs, which careers they may want to go into later in life. The landscape is very, I think is very complicated. It certainly boils my brain sort of on a daily basis. The diagram that I've included in there, and apologies if it's hard to see without sort of zooming in massively, but it's really just a diagram that intends to show, that, amongst other things, that all roads lead back to local employers. And one of the challenges that we've got with that is that, as most of you know, there's just under sort of 30,000 businesses in the county, we think, at the moment, and of those, 89% of them have are micros, so up to nine employees. So the challenge for us is very much getting employers to support a lot of the skills initiatives, and also to those of you that work for a small business or have been self-employed will know this very well. You're so busy on the day job, actually sort of trying to focus on, so what's happening with apprenticeships, what are these T levels that are coming in, why are you asking me to take on a Kickstart placement? The list is kind of quite heavy going, and there's sort of initiative overload and communication overload for a lot of the businesses. So a big part of what we're trying to do is simplify some of that. With limited resources, what we're trying to do is actually bring together, and I'll make sure you've got the link on this. So the skills portal in Gloucestershire is our attempt to sort of bring together the support that individuals might need in terms of looking for work, careers support online, and training opportunities. And it's just divided down into sort of particular journeys that people might need to take or want to take, if, for example, they're being made redundant, or if they're a young person looking for for work, etc. And then what we're really trying to do with the Employment and Skills Hub that Colin mentioned is there are a number of teams within GCC and within the LEP that are actually working on employment and skills. That we already work very closely together, and the idea here is really just to provide if you like, a sort of one front door approach to people that are looking for that support, not only for customers but also for teams that are working on this. So, as Mike was saying, each of the districts has got economic development capacity, and we work closely with them. But sometimes, being able to refer people directly to a hub, or the same for colleagues in health and care, to be able to refer people to a specific hub and support would actually make their lives much easier as well. So I'll leave it there for now. Very happy to answer any questions. Very happy to come back at future meetings if there's sort of specific topics as well that you'd like me to pick up on. Thanks, Matt.
Oh, thank you. That was really useful. Any questions? Any comments from anyone on any of the items that Pete covered there? Can't see any hands up.
Battle fatigue is definitely set in.
Absolutely. That's it. When you're 2 hours in, that's right. In that case, we'll move on then. So the last few items on the agenda then. So agenda item 7, so the work plan. So this is where we sort of have a review of what we've got on the work plan for the committee coming up. So I'm sort of happy to sort of open this up to the floor. We've obviously got a fairly wide remit, as you can sort of see from some of the presentations we've had today so we're sort of happy to kind of open it up to any sort of comments or suggestions people might have for items we can add to the work plan for this scrutiny committee. Equally happy to take that offline. I know obviously sometimes we need to be wary that we don't just sort of open up a very broad subject, and they need to be kind of we need to try and focus where we can, obviously. But I'm happy to obviously take any suggestions now, and then officers will have a look at them and sort of work up suggestions and proposals and that sort of thing. Paul, I've got you first. Paul Baker.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Simon mentioned earlier local transport policies, so it seems to me that it would be appropriate to take him up on that offer and perhaps tie that in with the carbon neutral transport proposal, so an overall presentation on transport. I'm wondering about youth unemployment. I think it is a real concern for all of us, and it'd be, I think, quite a good item to discuss and understand better and see what we're doing to seek to address it. In terms of the impacts of COVID, I assume that would hopefully take on board the issues which I mentioned earlier about working from home and the impact that might be having, and that might be one further bit further down the line when we better understand that. So those would be my initial thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, some very sensible suggestions in there. Chloe, I had you next.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, I don't want to keep banging on about the same thing, but as the initial and the first priority in the local industrial strategy was net zero, and so we've got carbon neutral transport being one sort of half of the council's big ticket item there as a possible future item. So I wonder whether we could have green jobs, which keeps coming up as probably the other half, really, or green sustainable growth perhaps as a future item.
Okay, thank you. Roger.
Yeah, I think Paul Baker's taken the words out of my mouth on this one mostly, but I think it's about the transport item, widening that in the light of the conversation we've had earlier today to include the sort of affordable transport to work especially, but or affordable public transport, and with particular, let's say affordable public transport, and with particular reference to both young people and employment.
Okay, thank you. And then Nikki.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered when we're likely to have meeting dates against the items. Do we know, please?
Yeah, so we'll I think we sort of take any suggestions raised today away and sort of need to obviously speak to officers about exactly how we structure some of them. But yeah, I mean the plan will be we'll sort of identify items against particular committee meetings going forward, certainly. Yeah, and I guess that'll be sent out. Yeah, we won't sort of wait necessarily until next meeting for that. I'm assuming that obviously we'll set thoughts for September ahead of time, obviously, and then for items further ahead than that, I'm assuming we can then debate that a bit at the next session if there are particular ones that make sense to fit around other people's diaries and things like that. Because obviously, if we can bring in external people that can help with particular items, then so much the better. Sorry, Sophie, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, so I was just going to add, as the chair said, we'll take these suggestions away and work with officers to see what would be timely to bring to the next meeting. We do always try to have a few meeting agendas set in advance, obviously, so you know what's coming up, and also so officers have got time to prepare. So once we've done that, I will circulate a draft work plan that members can come back to me on and comment on. Obviously, it's something for you to confirm as a whole that you're happy with. So we'll have that discussion offline via email over the summer, and we'll definitely have some agenda items set for the next few meetings.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that was everyone I had. Oh, sorry, Chloe, you. Sorry, I didn't realise that was another hand. Sorry.
No, sorry. It was great to hear about the statement of common ground and you know, the idea of looking a little further ahead, because it does concern me that things, you know, only fit within plan periods and that sort of thing. So perhaps an item where we could perhaps have a look at some of the pipeline that's coming a little further down the line, and have a look at the statement of common ground. That would be great.
Okay. Right, and I think that gives us plenty to work with. So, yeah, I think if we, as Sophie said, we'll sort of be in touch over sort of like the coming weeks over the summer, and confirm arrangements, and then we'll basically take it offline from this meeting. But I think we've got a good range of items there to work with, so that should be good. Okay then, so next item I've got on here is just date of future meetings. Just to be noted, I'm sure people have probably got them in the diaries already, but those are just listed out there. I'm assuming no one's got any comments or anything on that side of things. And then that just brings us on to the last item, which is the Executive Director's report. So this is from Colin. I don't believe we're doing a presentation on that one. It's really just a note to note that one. So duly noted. And that, I believe, wraps up our session today. So as I say, I'd say slightly longer than some sessions may be. I mean, obviously it depends on what we've got coming up. But I think hopefully a good kind of introduction to the committee, the range of subjects and the range of sort of the various bodies that we're working with and scrutinising. So hopefully that's been a useful session today. And thank you very much for all the officers who've presented and talked through all the respective areas. I think it's been, as I say, a really useful introduction to things. So yeah, thank you very much to everyone for your time today, and we'll wrap things up there.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's
Well
great.
done, Matt. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers, Matt.
Thanks
Thank you all for your time. Cheers.
Andrea, could you end the YouTube feed, please?